Borussia Dortmund. Let's switch gears here to the other Sunday game. That's such a tricky performance once again by Dortmund, and it's like once again I feel like they sleepwalk to this draw. It's for the third time now in a row that I feel like this Borussia Dortmund team has given away points, and it really didn't need to be this way. I think there was actually quite a lot of positives from this match. The biggest one being, and this could be medium term, a massive thing for Borussia Dortmund, is the resurgence of Gio Reyna, who I thought played really well against Barcelona. He obviously scores a great goal in this match. He is essentially a new signing for them if they can get him back going, if they can keep him injury free for more than 5 minutes, and essentially get that talent out. We all know how talented Gio Reyna is. No one ever disputed that Gio Reyna's talent. All the issues were other things: the injuries, the family, the fact that he changed agents to Mendes and all that kind of stuff. It's all off-field noise. No one ever disputed the player that Gio Reyna was. And if Gio Reyna can get his head sorted, and if Nuri Sahin can keep him playing, and he keeps playing like this, that's like a new signing, in my opinion, and one that really can elevate this Dortmund team. And I think for much of this game, that seemed to be the story. That Gio Reyna, for a second time in a row was back, that he was playing a fantastic match, that he was showing this long-lost seemed talent. He was there with maturity. He seemed happy to be on the field. He seemed happy to play for Borussia Dortmund. There was so much great stuff going on there. And then Jakob Brun-Larsen pops up with just minutes to go in the match and makes it 1-1 because Borussia Dortmund sleepwalked to this draw and throws away yet another 2 points. And it's really a shame, because it just kind of what could have been a really good Dortmund performance with a really good story just kind of turned sour now, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I didn't get a chance to watch this game because I had to cover the Manchester derby. But yeah, I mean, I've seen the highlights. There's an outstanding goal. It's we've talked about this a wee bit, and we talked about it with subscribers actually, and actually what goes back to the Barcelona game when the lineups were announced and people were asking about where Reyna would play, and I was saying, well, he'll probably play as a number 10 or number 8. I think that's more or less where he played in this game, if I'm not mistaken. And it's an interesting kind of role for him. You'll be able to tell me if he's done it for the US men's national team for quite a while, but it's always felt like the kind of natural progression for him at Dortmund before he picked up that last big injury and then obviously fell out the team and went off on loan to the Premier League last season. I'm trying to think what team. Maybe it might have been under Marco Reus, I think, when he was at the club. Mm-hmm. But it certainly felt like he was kind of finding his feet and developing into a number 10. And I actually think I maybe wrote something at the time saying how he was becoming the kind of natural successor to Marco Reus in that kind of number 10 position. And that goal he scored against Hoffenheim tonight was Marco Reus through and through, really, I thought. So that's really encouraging. That's actually really exciting to see if he can kind of continue doing that. But Dortmund continue being Dortmund, and it's hugely frustrating, and it's actually really interesting to see how they're actually going to finish the year up here, because they obviously get that point against Bayern Munich, which you could argue about the performance, but at the end of the day, it's still a great, it's a point against Bayern, so no one's going to argue with that. They then dropped 2 points against Borussia Dortmund, Mönchengladbach. I thought Gladbach were okay in that game. It wasn't a great performance from Dortmund. Then there's the Barcelona game, and then of course this Hoffenheim match. So that's 3 draws on the spot.
They lost to Barcelona.
Yeah, exactly. 6 points dropped in the Bundesliga. And they're beginning to kind of really slide down that league table, to be perfectly honest with you. They're now 8th level on points with Mainz and Bremen. Mm-hmm. And they have to go to Wolfsburg and face a pretty decent Wolfsburg side before the winter break. Now, Wolfsburg haven't been great at home, granted, so you never know. But we know that Dortmund haven't been great on the road either. So that match screams like 1-1 or 0-0 to me, to be perfectly honest with you. It doesn't scream Dortmund rebound by any means. So it's just deeply frustrating, isn't it, Manu? Because we continue to have these individual performances and these individual players who are just almost like taking turns to put in these incredible performances. We saw it from Jamie Gittins, obviously, over the last kind of couple of weeks. We saw it tonight from Gio Reyna, and we've seen it from other players in the past. Adeyemi obviously just really burst onto the scene in the first half, the first few games of the season. But it just feels like this is a team that's being defined by these individual performances rather than a team that's been defined by outstanding system or tactics. And I feel like that's why Dortmund keep dropping these silly points, because if these individuals aren't quite literally scoring or creating the goals for them, nobody's doing it, and the team just kind of falls apart.
Yeah, I mean, they're now 8th with 22 points, 5 points behind Leipzig, who are in 4th, right? That's the Champions League spot. The Bundesliga app said that Dortmund now 11 points behind Bayern Munich. Like, when are we going to stop putting Dortmund in the title race? I mean, why? I mean, it would be insanity to suggest that they're a title challenger, right? Or have been one for a while. I think there is a title race. It's just not Dortmund shouldn't be mentioned in it because there's other teams that are snooping around there, and I think Bayern are the favorites to win the title. But if they are beatable, it won't be by Dortmund. There's teams like Leverkusen, we mentioned Leipzig and Frankfurt will probably have a say in that. So I think it's a little ridiculous that we're still mentioning it. That in fact, right now they wouldn't be even in Europe. I was asked by a subscriber in the chat, like, "Oh, would it be bad if they were in the Europa League for a year?" I mean, they have to get there first, right? But also, I mean,
it's a push at this point.
It'd be really bad. It'd be really, really bad if they drop into the Europa League. The finances behind that are just so significantly different that, maybe
it might be a wake-up call. The only thing is it might be a wake-up call to that board.
I mean, the wake-up call should have happened last year when they finished 5th, where they only managed, they only managed to qualify. Granted, Dortmund secured their own qualification with the performances that they put in the Champions League. They won that 5th Champions League spot for the Bundesliga, which they then utilized themselves. But, at the end of the day, it's for a club like Dortmund, the drop-off in finances is significant. I give you a good example of what can happen of a club of that stature when they, and we're going to talk about them actually today, and that's Werder Bremen. Werder Bremen, for a good 9 to 10 year spell, always qualified for the Champions League. They as a club, they were financially extremely viable. They were actually one of the few teams in German football that not only ran a profit, but also had monies in their savings account. I don't have the exact year in my head anymore, but it was when Klaus Allofs was the sporting director. 1 year. It took 1 year for Werder Bremen to fail to reach the Champions League. And back then, it was the top 3 that made the Champions League. That 1 year led for them to the next year to go into the savings and increase the squad size and buy players for them to just push to get back in the Champions League. It became that ever-ending cycle of Bremen trying to catch up. Then they dropped to the Europa League, and they dropped completely out of Europe, and eventually the club was relegated. Now, this is an extreme scenario, right? But Bremen were one of the teams that almost went bankrupt during the COVID years. They're completely recovered now. They're in a much better place, but it took a lot of time. If Dortmund think they're beyond this, they don't need to look far to another club that happened to, Schalke, right? I mean, here's another club that once they started dropping out of those Champions League spots, you really get into kind of a death spiral. So yes, long-winded answer to saying it would be pretty bad to drop out of the Champions League spots.
Yeah. Do you know what's also crazy? You look at that table and see Dortmund in 8th, and the thing is, it's not even as if the teams above them are performing perfectly well. So the teams above them right now are Mainz, who are undoubtedly doing very well.
Yeah, they're a success story.
Stuttgart, who continue to trip over their own shoelaces this season. Very admirable club, fighting for the lives in Champions League, but a team that continue to drop points. They've only won 6 of the first 14 games. Freiburg, okay, yes, another overachiever, doing very well. RB Leipzig, we just talked about, not a great start to the season. Frankfurt, we just talked about, a team who continue to drop silly points because they can't defend. Leverkusen, who had a terrible start to the season, were dropping points left, right, centre. And the Bayern team, who we'll talk about in a minute, who are actually doing worse than they were last season. So, of the 7 teams above Dortmund in the league table, only 2 of them are actually overachieving. The rest of them have actually had poor starts this season. So, it's not even like, Eden Terzic, it's not even, it's like Nuri Sahin can point to league table like a lot of clubs would have last season and said, well, Xabi Alonso's Leverkusen team are just incredible and there's nothing to be done for that. They're losing points to very imperfect teams, and the interesting thing as well is I've got the Understat, which is the stats website that I use, and they put together the expected points, which is based on the expected goals you score and the expected goals you concede. And according to that, Dortmund's expected points total is exactly 8th. The table changes slightly when you figure it round to expected points. For example, Freiburg are 3rd, Stuttgart are 4th, Mainz are 5th, Frankfurt dropped to 6th, Gladbach up to 7th, but Dortmund are exactly where they should be. That's the point. They're not. It's not even as if like they're creating chances and not scoring them, or teams are scoring 40-yard, incredible goals that have low XG. They're exactly where they should be. And that's troubling because they're behind a lot of teams who are also struggling. And it should be ringing out alarm bells. It really should be. The team's not playing well. The tactics aren't well. The system's not well. They're relying on individual performances to really pull them out of their hole every week. And this game was no exception, it would seem. And it's great the likes of Gio Reyna, Adeyemi, Jamie Gittins are all doing well. And I guess you could argue that Sahin deserves a bit of credit for getting all these guys to look like they did, and I certainly agree with that. But it doesn't really matter if they can't all put it together every week consistently, does it?
Well, it sounds like there's good man management going on, but bad tactical management, right?
Yeah.
Players are playing for him because they like him, and he finds the right words, which expected. He's had a great career. He is someone who obviously can inspire you. He's a great assistant coach, in that regard. And it's
Which
really
is a little ironic because he was brought in last season to help Eden Terzic tactically,
with that,
wasn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, also with that, right? Like the player development. Player development was one of the criticisms. And he's doing a great job with that. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Individual players have. Especially ones where we thought, okay, maybe they're not going to go anywhere. Gio Reyna is the perfect example for that, starting to pick up. But it's like, how the Rolling Stones sound better than the individual artists in the band? Dortmund is the reverse of that.
Yeah. Worse than the sum of their parts.
Yeah, they're worse than the sum of the parts. And it's... that's troubling because you see players individually playing really well, but they're not able to put it together, and that's a tactics problem, right? And it's what's also odd. There's these spells and moments where they just look really great. The Barcelona game comes to mind. We had Josh Simon, and him and I discussed this. Like, it was really hard being critical to Dortmund because they actually played such great football against Barcelona, and there was a sense there that they, maybe that last cross goes in a little bit different, and Schlotterbeck puts that home, and we have a completely different discussion about the Barcelona game. There was a positive sense about this game, and so there is these moments where it looks really good, and then there's these moments where it doesn't, or where it's even worse. Against Barcelona, there was these moments of madness where they get these crazy goals scored against them because Groß misses a guy, or like. The high line is too high, or someone thinks they put someone offside and they didn't. And then there's these games against Hoffenheim where and I keep saying this, they just sleepwalk. They just stop playing altogether. It's just they're going through the motions, and the motions just become this repetition and slowness, and it's bad. It's really bad. And then, that is, I think, something, Dortmund really do need the winter break in that regard. They really need need to. I personally think they need a real big reset. Kind of like you just reset your headphones there, Stefan. That was smooth.
Yeah. As if I didn't have enough to worry about with my nose and sneezing and coughing, I realised my AirPods were running out of battery, so I had to change over there, yeah, which I thought I did a good job of it, actually, so hopefully nobody noticed. But yeah, Dortmund, we'll have to see what happens against Wolfsburg, but it might be a very tricky Christmas for them. But equally, they desperately need to go into the transfer. I feel like we'll kind of... I want to hold off on talking too much about transfers because I feel like we're going to do all of this in January and on that last week before Christmas, but we'll do a lot of transfer chat and the bonus shows and things like that. But yeah, all is not well at the Westfalen Stadion, let's put it that way.